Al, Kyrie out, but how's Jason Tatum right now?
Jason is he's in the locker room getting dressed. I don't know. He'll go through pregame shoot, see how he feels. But he was feeling a little bit under the weather last night before we left, and then continued this morning. So, if he plays, he'll play in probably shorter stints.
Do you have any idea how much more you're going to be resting Al and Kyrie from this point?
No, I think it's one of the things was the back-to-back. Obviously, was a big part of that. With Al specifically, both are a little bit dinged up, but I think ultimately, we'll proceed over the next 6 or next 5 or however many are left after this. Just kind of game to game.
So just one thing you have to zone in on facing this performance team.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. First of all, they've played with a great deal of urgency all year. I love the way that they play offensively. They've really spread us out. When we haven't impacted the ball, we've really struggled with that. And then on the other end of the court, I think we have to play with better tempo than we did here. I thought we played fine in the 2 home games that we won, but here, the third quarter especially, the game just turned on us, and I thought that we looked pretty sluggish in that third quarter. They had a lot to do with that, and D'Angelo Russell was putting on a show against us in the third quarters. But I do think that we need to be we need to get up the court quicker than we did, especially here.
Coach, obviously there's been a large conversation about fan reactions, especially to players, obviously something happening in-house as well. Do you think the NBA should be more proactive about maybe doing more to kind of protect players, or kind of how do you see it?
That's a really good question. And I said this yesterday, about 99% of the time that I hear any fan back and forth, player back and forth, coach back and forth, is good-natured ribbing. And then there's the 1% that does cross the line. And there are a couple times a year where you kind of look back like, really, you just said that? Obviously, I didn't hear, because it was on the other end of the court, the Cousins stuff in Boston. But I certainly, the guys deserve the right to compete, play, and feel safe and comfortable in the environment they're in. And I think, the vast majority of fans appreciate the game for what it is, and that's an opportunity to watch the world's best do something all on one court at once. And it's unfortunate that, people have crossed that line at times.
But do you think there's anything more proactive that's possible?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, because we're really close as far as proximity goes to the fans. I do think that the recent thoughts and commercials and talking points and fan videos and those type of things can all be impactful as reminders, but ultimately I think it's about all of us just continuing this dialogue of making sure that it's a place where we can appreciate those guys all putting their talent on display for all of our enjoyment and appreciation, and hopefully you don't hear stuff like what's been said.
Coach, a lot has been said about how well you guys have played without Kyrie and how good your record is. How do you explain why you guys have been so successful when he doesn't play?
Well, I think all that stuff is a small sample size, so I don't really get too big into that. You can always go through and look at who we're playing, when we're playing, who else is available, all those other things. But if we want to be our very best, Kyrie Irving obviously is a big part of that.
Right, without Kyrie, obviously we see more of Terry Rozier today. I was curious what you thought of his performance this season, especially after, the way he played in the playoffs, really kind of breaking out last year.
Well, I think he's done everything we could have asked. It's been a tough transition, especially at the start of the year. But I think he's just grit his teeth and done as well as he could in it. And I really appreciate that. Everybody in the league and around the league knows that with increased opportunity and increased rhythm in a game, what he can do. And at the same time, it's hard. Like I always say, any of us that work for a real successful company, if we had to take a demotion for somebody else to come in and take our spot while still being reliable every night to giving to the good of the whole, would struggle with that. But he hasn't, as much as anybody I've been around. I think both him and Jalen going to the bench this year, the way they've handled it has allowed us to you know, preach team, talk about team, and hopefully be better once the playoffs come.
During that process, did you ever have to talk or have a sit down with either him or Jalen about that?
Oh, of course, but that's because you care about him. You want him to know that you know, this is just part of it, and you know, you're on a really deep team with a lot of very similar players, and ultimately the goal is for everybody to win. And so those guys are both, you know, they're both going to be fine for a long, long time in this league, and they're both really good players.
Last couple of years, you guys had a better season than you're going to have this year, but you didn't ultimately have health. This year, you're going to have to win a few rounds on the road. And are you in a better spot, can you tell yet, than where you were the last couple of years? Is there any way to evaluate whether you're...
I don't think there's any way to really evaluate it. I think, you know, obviously we saw Indiana last night. I think they're terrific, and they, you know, in a lot of ways, you know, could have won that game, and it was anybody's game at the end, but they made every play to win it. And a couple things don't go our way, they do win. They're awfully good. Top of the East is awfully good. It's a different East than it was the last couple of years. That's one thing. And so I would say that, you know, we'll see how it all plays out. You know, I think we're a capable team that when it plays its best, when it plays together, has a chance to win. But I think everybody, when you get to the playoffs, is capable and has a chance to win, and it's about who plays well on that stage.
Fred Hoiberg took the Nebraska job today.
Is that official?
Not official, I guess, but the.
Yeah, there's that.
Oh, is it?
They announced
Yeah,
it.
okay. Just wondering, was it challenging for you to go from kind of coaching? Was it an adjustment to go from coaching 18-year-old kids to grown men? Was there any kind of
18-year-old kids to 18-year-old kids.
I guess yeah, some 18, I guess.
We're last year, with the exception of Al, I think we had 4 starters that were as young as my first Butler starting lineup. So I don't think it's that much different. The difference is that these guys, you know, have a lot of pressure on them. They face a lot of scrutiny. Every game is overanalyzed. Praise is handed out in a crazy way, and criticism is handed out in a crazy way. And you just kind of manage your way through that stuff. And I think that'd be hard for any age. I think the younger you are, the harder it would be. But that's why I've got a lot of respect for our players, because they do handle it well. I mean, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, if they were compared with most, you know, 21 and 22-year-old players, there wouldn't be as much criticism. But those guys have set the bar high for themselves, and I think that's a good thing, and it'll be good for them for a long time. But you know, that's part of it, and you learn a lot. I think a lot of young players go through the age and stage of trying to prove themselves, and then you try to, you know, do as well as you can while you can. So anyways, go ahead. No.
Your team will have a lot to do with the AC because you got 2 against Miami and then 1 against Orlando. How do you approach those games knowing that it's going to mean as much to Brooklyn, Detroit?
We're just trying to play well ourselves and give ourselves our best chance of winning. All these teams are fighting through 6 through 8, and you know, there's a lot of good teams.
Brad, back to back, your defense really is great at funneling teams into mid-range shots. You got a lot of guys who love mid-range shots. How do you not fall into a trap of just the jump shooting game today?
For us,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that they make it tough because Allen sits at the rim in both their man and the zone, and so it's hard to get layups. I mean, you ultimately want to try to move them around, spread them around. Obviously, that's more difficult without Al in the game at the 5. But you know, I think we have to play up the floor. Like I said, we have to play with better tempo than we did last time. We have to get into the teeth of the defense, and you know, our first attack probably won't be our best shot. We'll need to get it side to side a little bit.
Coach, it's been either D'Angelo Russell or Joe Harris, Spencer Dinwiddie. You mentioned Jared Allen. Have you been impressed with the way Brooklyn players have kind of consistently gotten better over the years?
Yeah, they've done a great job here. There's a great way about it. You can tell Kenny has a great culture established, and they've drafted good players too. Those guys are good players.
You should focus on getting better on defense lately. Are you in the right direction? You know?
I thought we played one of our better defensive games last night. I thought the Pacers, you know, still made tough shots, but we have to get a lot better on that end if we want to have a chance to, you know, win anything significant.
Especially for the playoffs?
Yeah. I don't know yet. Yep.